In the Cotton Belt, sharecroppers of all backgrounds struggle to make a living.
My dad was Murray Osmond Sr. He was born in the Amory area in 1902. You learn early to help out, and Daddy was one of those that he was going to show you how, and then he expected you to do it. I was driving a tractor when I was 7 years old. This is part of the property that Daddy farmed with other people that sharecropped. Yeah, I'm just wondering how much sweat I left out there. My mother grew up in Louise, Mississippi, in the Delta, and Dad was there farming at the time, and that's how he met my mom. I think she was 14 when they got married. People married a lot earlier back in the day, I guess. But yeah, she was 14, and Daddy was, I think, maybe 10 years older than her. My grandfather was Robert Osmond, and he was actually born in Oklahoma, and he was Cherokee. One of the few pictures that we had of him, he was on the reservation, actually sitting in front of a teepee, so you know that goes back a long way. And Granddaddy, when he was younger, he was a trapper, because he used to, Dad used to tell me about Hyde Trading Company in Memphis, and that's where they would go and sell their pelts. And I remember Daddy also trapping in the winter months when it was too cold to do anything else. My parents were very religious, church-going people. That's most what I remember about them. And we'd go over to see my grandmother, and of course Uncle Homer and Uncle Grady, all of us kids would be over there on Sunday afternoon. There was a pretty good crop once you get everybody together. All of Daddy's brothers and everything were musicians. Uncle Homer played any instrument that was there, you know. He piano, guitar, violin, mandolin, banjo. Uncle Grady, same thing. They were all musicians, and when they were kids, they actually went and performed at what Daddy called juke joints, and they'd go and play, and everybody drink too much, and but they didn't have to drive home. They just climbed in the wagon, turned the horses loose, and the horses would carry them to the house. But Daddy said he's woke up a lot of days sitting in the wagon in front of the barn. And Daddy was the least one to drink. You grow up like he did, all you knew was farming. He always felt like he was in control of his life, whether he was or not, when he was farming. You know, he was his own boss, made his own decisions, and in most cases did pretty good at it. Or sometimes there'd be 10 families that participated in a sharecropping operation, you know. And some of the people would be full-time, some of them would have other jobs, but the land is what they would share for Daddy growing the crops. And when they harvested, they'd deduct all of the expenses of growing that crop, and then they'd split up on some predetermined basis how the monies was going to be split up. And I remember hearing Daddy talk, and it was amazing how hard they worked for such a little return. But, you know, they didn't know how to do anything else. As far as the income level, almost everyone in this whole group were basically about even. You know, you were considered well off, like my Uncle John Parham that owned the gin. They were considered extremely wealthy by the standards in those days. Of course, a cotton gin that he had, that's where everybody had to bring their cotton, because it was the closest one, and there were no other options. In fact, I don't even know if there was another cotton gin in that part of the country. But you'd get on the road, and you'd just see tractor after tractor, or teams of horses that'd be pulling big wagons going down to the cotton gin for them to process it. But the cotton at the Tupelo cotton mill was after it had already been ginned and baled, and then they'd bring it to Tupelo and then they would ship it out on rail cars, the bale cotton, to go to the textile plants to be turned into fabric. But yeah, I remember Daddy talking about it because the market would be affected by how much cotton had been harvested that year. Of course, if there was an abundance of cotton, then the prices wouldn't be as high, and if it was scarce, then of course, and that's the reason Daddy would try to always get the cotton harvested, processed, and they would actually bring it to Tupelo on big trucks. You know, we didn't have, of course, Amory has a rail connection, but they would truck it into Tupelo out here at the cotton mills and warehouses, basically. And they would offload them, and they'd weigh them, and they'd get, I remember they'd get little tickets, and those tickets you could, of course, turn in to get paid for it. And they would have, I remember some of the terminologies where the grades of cotton would be middling, fair to middling, you know, and those were the different grades of the way they graded the cotton, and I don't remember what they meant, but I know that Dad would get real excited when he got into those upper ratings because he knew he was going to get a better price